Glad to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Really glad to have this guy back. He is my senator, one of two. He's also a guy I call a friend, and I think that he's a guy who works really hard for the Constitution for this country. It's Senator Ted Cruz. Ted, how are you?
Bags, I'm doing terrific. How about yourself?
I'm living the dream. I'm doing well. I saw your CPAC speech. I want to get into that full-throated in a moment. I want to talk about a lot of what's going on. But let me ask you, because I asked people, what do they want? What do you want to know from Ted Cruz? And they want to know, what's the weather like in Cancun this time of the year? If you don't mind.
You know what? To be honest, it's about the same as it is in Houston. It's about 80 degrees both places.
Ted, you've lived in Texas a long time. I've been here 16 years now. It's been 120 years since we had a weather event like we saw a couple of weeks ago. And man, did it suck. I mean, you can't flush the toilets, you can't eat, you can't drink. I was doing my show literally from a cell phone for a couple of days. You had no power. We're controlled by something called ERCOT that I'd never heard of before. I thought it was in Disney World. And you acted like a father. You know, I'm the father of 5 daughters, as you know. You've got a couple of great daughters. And when the kids say, "Dad, can we?" Our initial reaction is, well, yeah, that makes sense. And then you thought better of it. I mean, that's really the story, right?
No, that's right. I took my kids to the beach, and the media and Democrats lost their minds and treated it as if I were selling nuclear secrets to the Chinese communists.
Right.
Listen, at the end of the day, we're in a time where there's a lot of political theater, unfortunately, and there's a lot of anger. I got to tell you, it was interesting. So yesterday, I took my daughter to her softball practice. Was talking with some of the dads, and one of the dads was like, "You know what? I'm a Democrat. I don't agree with you on a bunch of issues, but I got to say, this is pretty nuts."
It is. But you manned up, Ted.
It's a sign of where we are.
It is. And you manned up immediately. You said it was a mistake. Even when Hannity tried to give you an out, you said, "No, Sean, it was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it." And you came back. You're giving out water. You were there with the people. Your dog was fine the whole time, for God's sakes. Ted, did you think that TMZ would go stalking your dog? I mean, come on, man.
Okay, that really is one of the stranger chapters of this, that Snowflake, our little white fur ball, who's a rescue dog, suddenly became an internet celebrity with false, like the story was told that we left Snowflake in the cold, shivering, and it was all nonsense. It was totally false. But today's fake news, they actually don't bother to check any facts. The dog was there with a dog sitter, with the heat on, with the power on, and But I will tell you this, Pag. So I walked Snowflake this weekend, and walked Snowflake last weekend, and both times walking around the neighborhood, Snowflake doesn't seem to be remotely aware that the woke left is rising to his defense, and I got to say, I think his attitude towards them is a little bit like his attitude towards a fire hydrant.
Well, there you go. Well, Snowflake doesn't realize he's got paparazzi now, which is interesting to me. Ted Cruz, senator of the great state of Texas, saw your CPAC speech. I thought it was great. I'm glad that you did attack Cancun, got that out of the way. Now let's talk about the future of the country. And I want to talk to you as the lawyer you are, as a guy who I think would be an amazing Supreme Court justice, but you explained to me and to my audience why you're not in for that. You think you can be more effective as a senator. But I want to talk about the process, because the left keeps on talking about 60 cases thrown out, no merit. Ted, let's not talk about whether there was fraud or not. I know how I feel, and I'm pretty sure I know how you feel. Let's talk about why the court didn't take any of these cases. Isn't that a dereliction of duty, especially when Texas sues 6 other states? The Constitution says the Supreme Court has to hear it, doesn't it?
Well, the Constitution does give original jurisdiction to the Supreme Court in suits between one state and another state, and I think the court made a mistake in not hearing those cases. With respect to the Pennsylvania case, I publicly urged the court to take that case.
Right.
The lawyers there asked me if I would argue the case if the Supreme Court took the case, and I agreed that I would. At the end of the day, the court didn't take the case. And I think given the distrust, given the division in this country, it would have been far better for the country and our democratic process for the court to take it and address the legal issues head on. Unfortunately, it chose not to do so.
So, and that's my point. And the reason why I bring this up is actually very simple. Last night, after seeing you speak, after seeing the former president speak, after seeing the South Carolina governor, Kristi Noem speak, I mean, what a great, Dan Bongino, what a great get-together you guys had in Orlando. So I posted last night, let's go forward as conservatives and not fall for the division of the left and let's unify as a country and stop looking back to November 3rd. Ted, Go to my Facebook if you want to see angry people. People actually thought I was a leftist. I was brown-nosing everybody. I was giving up. I'm giving into fraud. How dare you? What you just said is quintessential. It's the truth. If the court took it and then said there's no merit, now we go forward. The problem is, Ted, there are millions of Americans who believe, like you and I believe, in conservative values, traditional American values, in the Constitution, who think they were screwed on November 3rd. How do we go forward if the court system won't at least say, look, at least we heard it, we thought there was no merit? What do you say to them?
Well, look, I think it's a very important question, and there's an overlay, which is that the mainstream media right now, they're not behaving like journalists anymore. They're behaving like propagandists.
Right.
And so they are nakedly partisan. They hate Trump so much that just Trump derangement syndrome turned them into foaming at the mouth radicals. And so on the question of voter fraud, the mainstream media's view now is it is an objective lie to say there's any voter fraud anywhere and anytime. And that's just nuts.
Right.
I mean, that's not remotely fact-based. That's not. I believe we should make decisions based on facts, based on evidence. It's the reason why on January 6th, when I objected to the electors, what I argued for is appointing an electoral commission to consider the evidence and decide it on the merits, not on procedural grounds, but on the merits, assess the strength of the evidence.
Right.
But the media doesn't want to be driven by facts. It doesn't want to be driven by substance. Today's media, they wear Joe Biden hats, figuratively, and I suspect more than figuratively in some of the instances, and they are actively engaged in deceiving the populace. So here's the answer: we got to go around them. You're doing it every day. As you know, I launched a podcast last year called Verdict with Ted Cruz.
And it's great. Yeah.
That podcast, we've had over 25 million downloads. People are actually hungry to understand what's going on without the filter of the mainstream media. And I think we need to keep using tools to get facts and substance out because the media is no longer in that business.
Yeah, it's Ted Cruz, Senator, great state of Texas. Again, I listened to your speech. It was amazing at CPAC. It was invigorating. You said Trump ain't going anywhere, which is great. But I dared, again, Ted, I dared say, let's look toward 2022, get the House and maybe the Senate back at 2024. I'm in trouble for that, too. I have to keep on looking back to 2020. So how do we go forward? Let's switch gears to some of the Republicans in name only that you work with in Congress. You've got people that were named by the former president yesterday, and he was right about those names. There are 10 people in the House who voted that to impeach him. You had 3 people in the House that just recently said, yeah, we're going to vote for this $1.9 trillion, for this Equality Act thing that basically says women's sports are over. That's really the bottom line with the Equality Act. How do you weed out the rhinos? How do you weed out those who don't believe in conservative values but put an R by their name to win the election? Do you primary them all? Do you keep on naming them? Because the left is pretty congealed, Ted. The right isn't necessarily.
Yeah. Look, I think the democratic process is a really powerful check on office holders, and I believe office holders need to honor the promises they made to the voters. We have a huge disconnect between what politicians say on the campaign trail and what they actually do in office. And I believe that what you do in office should be directly tied to what you told the voters you would do in office. I spoke this afternoon with President Trump, and one of the things he and I spoke about is the frustration that there are a lot of Republicans in Congress right now that seem really eager to roll over to the Joe Biden administration, seem really eager to roll over and just give them whatever they want. That's a mistake. I think what we need to do is we need to stand and fight for principle. We don't be mean and personal and nasty like the left. Yeah. But we should honor our promises to the voters to fight against the really terrible policies and the terrible nominations that are coming from the Biden administration. It's only going to get worse. And right now there's some Republicans that seem shell-shocked. You don't win elections if you're not standing, and if you're not standing strong, and if you're not staying true to the voters. That's what I think all of us should be doing. It's Senator Ted Cruz, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. Check out that podcast. It's amazing. And also, what is it? One Vote Away. That's the name of the book, right? One Vote Away, How a Single Supreme Court Justice seat can change history, and it takes you inside the U.S. Supreme Court, how all of our fundamental rights hang, or right after right after right hangs by a single vote.
Yeah.
It tells war stories of some of the biggest landmark cases at the court that I argued myself, that I helped litigate, and it ended up becoming the #1 bestseller in the country on Amazon.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, a fun, interesting read if you really want to understand free speech and religious liberty and the Second Amendment and what happens behind the curtain at the U.S. Supreme Court.
I hope everybody goes and gets it. One last question on elections. Then I want to get into coronavirus and then let you go. I appreciate you taking the time today, Ted. People have told me I'm never going to vote again. I don't trust it. I don't believe it. What the former president said yesterday made perfect sense. You need photo ID like we have in Texas. You need
Absolutely.
to not have unsolicited mass mailing of ballots to people that you have no way of verifying. And you need to make sure you've got a check and balance system where both sides get to go and make sure that these votes are verified. Those three things I think we can agree on. Everybody can agree on. It's not going to happen as long as Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So what can you really proactively do to let people know who are watching and listening that, yes, you should vote?
Well, and let me give a qualifier on that. You're right that it's not going to happen at the federal level because the Democrats control Congress and the executive. And right now, Democrats, they've made a really cynical decision that voter fraud is in their partisan interest. And so they oppose everything you listed. They oppose any reasonable common sense measure to stop voter fraud. There is a chance to make real progress against voter fraud at the state level. And Republicans control state legislatures, control governor's offices in a lot of different states that could do a lot better. A lot of states that unfortunately had very lax systems in place in this last election. Photo ID, we should require it. Look, if you go into a bar and you order a beer, you got to show a photo ID. I flew an airplane early this morning from Houston to D.C. I had to show a photo ID. You ought to have to show a photo ID to vote. And in fact, when I was Solicitor General of Texas, I represented a coalition of states before the U.S. Supreme Court defending photo ID laws. Indiana passed a photo ID law. We ended up winning 6-3 in front of the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
Justice John Paul Stevens, who was a noted liberal, he described how photo ID laws protect the integrity of elections. They protect legal votes, and voter fraud steals votes from people who are legal and eligible voters. That's a fight we need to fight, and we need to keep focusing on. You know, for anyone who says, well, gosh, I'm worried about voter fraud, so I'm not going to vote. My view is that's surrendering this country.
Yeah.
That the stakes in 2022 and 2024, they couldn't be higher. And so if you're unhappy by what's happening, the answer isn't to stay home and hand the country over to the socialists and the radicals. The answer is to show up and bring your friends and bring your family and bring your neighbors and take the country back. And that, I think 2022 is going to be a very good election. I think 2024 is going to be a very good election, because Joe Biden and Schumer and Pelosi, they are overshooting, and it's already doing real harm.
You and I agree, and all politics really are local or is local, and I hope that people understand that. Change your city council, change your legislature in your state, change your governor's office if you have to. Really gets me angry. We can talk about this next time, that there were 5 out of the 6 legislatures that just allowed changes in election law that did nothing, and they were Republican. 5 out of 6 were Republican. It drives me nuts. It's Ted Cruz. Ted, coronavirus. Kristi Noem said something yesterday or the day before that was absolutely correct. Dr. Fauci has been wrong a lot. The guy said it's silly to wear masks. Go on the cruise. Put a mask on, but be 6 to 8 feet apart. You don't have to wear a mask. Now you have to wear a mask if you're 6 to 8 feet apart. Then he went to a ball game. He didn't wear a mask himself. Now, Ted, we should double mask. So I'm confused. I don't know what to do, but I do know this. My kids and your kids are not in a high-risk category, and I want them back in the classroom. My kids and your kids probably are, because we're in Texas, but I want them back in the classroom around this country so they can learn. There is childhood depression that's going nuts. People haven't seen their friends forever. What do we do to get past this diversity and understanding about what we can and can't do with coronavirus?
Well, Democrats are really fond of saying as a political slogan, follow the science. Yeah. And yet when it comes to schools being open, far too many Democrats are ignoring the science. It is an outrage. It is a national tragedy how many kids are still not back in school or not in-person learning. You know, last spring, right when the COVID lockdown happened, Heidi and I, with our girls, they worked remotely all through the spring semester, and it was tough with both of us there at home working with a 10-year-old and 12-year-old girl. With both of us there, it was difficult. I cannot imagine how difficult it would be for a single mom with several kids and without the resources to get any help.
True.
We are seeing millions of kids, and in particular, low-income kids, African-American kids, Hispanic kids, that are just being left behind. That what started out as a week or two, that became a couple of months, has now been coming up on a year now of these kids not getting the education they need, and they're getting abandoned. And it's because the Democrats care more about the union bosses of the teachers' unions than they care about millions of kids getting left behind. The science unequivocally says that we can put our kids back in school safely. My girls are back in school. That in Texas, we're seeing that works. And this is crass politics trumping taking care of the kids. I think it is an outrage, and I think anytime these Democratic politicians are home, they should be answering questions to parents. Why are you letting these kids be forgotten and left behind? Because that's what's happening right now.
Is it about votes, Ted? Why kiss up to the teachers' unions? And here's the reason why I ask. We've seen articles recently that people have written who are for the teachers' union saying nice white families are trying to kill black families to go back to school. People are screaming racism in Chicago because people are saying, let's go back to school. I mean, honest to God, they're calling it racist to put children back in the classroom. But what you just said is so spot on. Black families, Hispanic families, lower income families are suffering exponentially more than the middle rural white family is. So why do they give in to the teachers union? What's up with that?
So at some level, it's about votes, but more fundamentally, I think it's about money.
Okay.
Teachers unions are massive, massive donors to the Democrats, to the tunes of tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars. And not only that, but their political activists provide the boots on the ground in terms of organizing and turning out their vote. And let me be clear, there are teachers all across this country who love the kids they're teaching. They want to be back teaching,
right.
But their union bosses are hardcore activists. You know, the head of one of the big teachers unions was asked a number of years ago, how come you don't stand up for the kids? And the head of the teachers union says, well, kids don't pay union dues.
Wow.
It is all about money. And for Joe Biden, the Biden administration is willing to ignore the science, ignore his own CDC that says kids should be back in school. It's safe and it hurts kids more not to be back in school. Then never mind about the science, because there's a whole lot of money from the teachers unions bosses that are willing to leave these kids behind, even after the kids have been vaccinated. You look at Chicago, where my understanding is that the teachers have been vaccinated, and the union bosses are still saying after they're vaccinated, they still can't teach and go into school. That is wrong. And you want to talk about an impact. The rich kids are doing fine. Rich kids, they can hire tutors. They can spend money to take care of the kids.
Right.
But for middle class kids, for low income kids, many of these kids are simply getting left behind. And today's Democratic Party, as best I can, they're not behaving as if they care one whit about those kids.
Same exact argument for school choice, which we can get into next time. Yes. It's Senator Ted Cruz, great state of Texas. Ted, thanks a million for the time and the access today. Great speech at CPAC, and keep on fighting for America, my man. I appreciate you.
You got my word on it. Thanks, Pat.
All right, brother. We're back after this in the Joe Pack Show. Stay right here.